Hello and welcome to another Monday Club episode of the Endless Celts Podcast. For once, we actually have Gavin joining us on the Monday Club, which I believe may be one of the very few times that me and Gavin have actually done a podcast together in a long, long time now. Not often we get to do, especially on a Monday at least, a podcast together. So welcome, Gavin, to the Monday Club. Hope you've had a good weekend. I hear there was a game of football was played this weekend that might have had a bit of a bearing on the league title and where it's going to go this season. How was your weekend, Gav?
Look, it was a fantastic weekend. It was brilliant. Social media on top of that, which obviously doesn't pales in comparison to the reality of actually being to the game and witnessing the victory. But social media has been an added bonus. It's been brilliant. The entire week building up to the game, it was great because we were the overwhelming favourites for that, and I think that really helped to kind of ease the nerves. However, whenever kickoff started, I was actually quite quiet for a lot of the game up until the first goal, just because I was aware of what was at stake, of what could be gained with the 3 points, and just how pivotal that game was. It was a fantastic game. And everything since then has been brilliant. It's been a brilliant weekend. Great weather too, as you can probably tell. Yeah, I'm a happy chappy, mate. I cannot complain at all. I'm really, really, really content. And there's so many juicy topics to talk about tonight, which I'm really looking forward to, mate.
Well, many juicy topics. I've not got a starting 11 worth of topics on hand, but I'm sure we all know the 3 or 4 that we're going to discuss tonight, and surely it's going to be all enthusiasm and positivity going for the topics tonight of all nights. Anthony, you've had a busy weekend from what I led to believe in the group chat. I think you've been everywhere that any Celtic official has been this weekend. You've been there alongside them. How's your weekend been?
Just very similar to Gav, mate. Can't talk highly enough of how brilliant it's been. It's been an amazing time. I was at the match with my big sister Lindsay on Saturday, which was absolutely brilliant, and went and had a couple of drinks, etc. In the bar afterwards, in the stadium, and then kind of be family night on Saturday night, just watching the highlights back, and obviously with a few shared bits as well. And then yesterday, myself and Jude and my dad and Lindsay and Kev and my nephew Owen, we were all through at the Hydro for the Player of the Year night as well, which was absolutely brilliant. Not just paying tribute to the team's efforts for this season, but for the 20 years that the event's been running. And obviously it was just legend after legend, either presenting or receiving an award, and rounding off with obviously Matt's clean sweep, which I'm sure we'll touch on later, but also the return of the King of Kings, who just looks like he could still play the now. There's not an ounce of fat on him. He looks absolutely tremendous, and absolutely brilliant. One of the best weekends ever. As you can tell, the voice is going a wee bit tonight, but I think we'll be able to make it through. And here's hoping that this weekend's just been the start of what we hope will be a lovely couple of weeks.
Surely to God. It's what, 12 more days of the entire domestic season, and that will wrap up the last 2 games and then the cup final itself. So surely it's smiles all around for these next couple of weeks and going into the summer. As just touch on what you're seeing there about Larson before we go into the main intro here. He looks fantastic, as does Joshua Samaras. Seeing all the players and all these people coming even into the game on Saturday was just amazing to see, even on TV, and kind of realizing how many stars are coming back for last night. But I have to ask, is it just me, or does Larson look like he's starting to grow the hair back out? Perhaps going for the grey, silver fox dreadlocks. Maybe he's going to go for in his latter years. It's just starting to become a bit more than a buzz cut.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, without going into the realms of fantasy with can we get Larson back as a striker to partner Cargo, let's lead into the intro video that's been kindly donated to us, shall we say, by our good man Willie. And there we have it. If anybody's missed that game somehow, I think you've got all the juicy gossip points right there in the intro. The 2 goals, the red card, the penalty, and a little bit of Brendan Rodgers at the end there as well. So without any kind of further ado, let's just crack straight into talking about the game. Who scored first? I forgot.
Anthony, floor is yours.
Yeah, for me.
I forgot who scored
Obviously,
first
it
goal.
was
Matt O'Reilly. Jesus Christ.
our player of the year, Matt O'Reilly. Yep.
That completely blanked me. Yeah, sorry,
mate,
Anthony.
to the best.
If you want to lead that, I remember the goal. Obviously, comes in from the right side. He collects the ball, turns onto his left foot. We all have the cross in. I'll let lovely shot into the kind of bottom corner. I'll let you give it more justice. So, Anthony, off you go.
Cheers, mate. No, it was a really brilliant strike, and for it to be that low at Jack Butland's near post, it really has to be accurate. To get past a keeper, he has qualities. I mean, he did have a great game on Saturday. There's no denying it, but Matt, he just places it so low, so accurate that even though it's at his near post, he's not got any chance of getting it. And it's funny. I was actually, talking to one of the guys I sitting here, saying, it reminded me of a similar type of goal, but I couldn't for the life of me remember who scored it in the Invincible year. I think the match ended in a draw. But then obviously it was doing the rounds on social media. It was Stuart Armstrong's goal from the 1-1 game in that season. Very, very similar strike to beat, I can't remember who it wouldn't have been Alan McGregor, whoever the Fodringham maybe would have been in the Rangers goal that day. But absolutely brilliant finish to kind of, set us on our way. And we obviously with what happened a couple of minutes later, we were I was off there, but if we keep this up, this could end up being one of those matches that warrants a DVD release on its own. But as goals change games, it didn't quite work out that way. But certainly fantastic strike, and Matt O'Reilly certainly had one hell of a weekend.
He's had a busy weekend, so he has. Was it Matt O'Reilly, I believe, gave the long ball into Dyson Maeda for the second goal as well?
Carter Vickers.
Was it Carter Vickers? Sorry. Gavin, I'll let you, if you want to describe the second goal. It was quickly after the first one anyway. It was quite a fast-paced first half.
Yeah, the long diagonal from Vickers was delicious. It was beautiful to see, and unfortunately we don't do enough of that. Rangers certainly employ that kind of tactic, that the long ball. They're quite effective at that cross ball, but Vickers did it. It was, it was a really good pass. Maeda on the run, perpetual motion, and his first touch was excellent. We don't always say that about him, but the first touch was excellent, and I like the fact that he didn't procrastinate. He had the plan, took the touch, set in himself, and he crossed it in. And the Rangers are trying to get back to defend it, and Lundstrom. Obviously, it was an own goal, and he didn't mean to do that, but he had ample time to sort his feet out, which is really quite perplexing. Even from I've heard from Rangers fans' points of view about that, and even they can't. They're quite critical of him. He had enough time to sort his feet out, and it happens. There's probably nothing worse than scoring an own goal in a Glasgow derby, and I'm just glad that it happened to such a person like Lundstrom. But the fact that it happened so quickly, following on from the first goal, it just shows you how people kind of lose their heads right after losing a goal, how you don't manage to set yourself as a team, which is evidence about how quickly we conceded right after that. So that goal was brilliant. But we all kind of probably had license to think that was a game over at that point, as Anthony was saying. You're thinking maybe this will get grounds for a DVD. We've scored 2 goals so quickly, it could get worse and worse and worse. And I think we all had that on our mind. Brilliant, by the way, brilliant from Maeda. See his reaction. I know that Maeda, he's quite passive. I think that's the word. He doesn't really show much emotion during games, even when he scored or if he's under pressure, taking flack from fans. He kind of keeps a screensaver face, but Maeda, his reaction was really, really good. I was so glad about that. There's been a feel-good story about Maeda, especially coming back from injury. Whenever we thought that his season was consigned, but the fact that he jumped into the crowd and he was hugging the fans. And I think I even saw on his social media after the game, he said, "I never knew that you could get a yellow card from jumping into the crowd." Naivety at its best, But I think somebody put it in the group chat that he's fast becoming a cult hero. But just to wrap it up, brilliant celebration from Maeda. So happy that Lundstrom put in his own net. And at that moment, at that time in the ground, it was euphoria, absolute euphoria. Beautiful, beautiful stuff.
It was, and I'm going to touch on their goal very quickly just to get it out of the way, because we can't, cover a game and pretend that they didn't score. They did. As you said, Gavin, it came quite quickly after we got our second as well. Quite a whirlwind moment. And as Anthony says, if we got the third in at some point, if we scored the penalty perhaps, or if they didn't score this kind of single goal that they got, maybe we could have went on to 4-5 and been a DVD-worthy kind of match itself. Still a great match anyway, regardless. But the goal comes from the left side. Silva does a little jink and lays it off to, I can't remember who it is, I don't care who it was, but it's a crossover to the far post, which takes the ball into our kind of centre back, left back kind of positions, the zone where they should be defending. The headed ball comes back across the face of goal, which kind of wrong foots Hart, who flails a little bit to try and put a arm out somehow, but he's really got no chance once the ball comes back over the face of him, because he's kind of caught flat-footed and he's on the wrong side. Dessa gets the head on it and then it goes. So, decent enough goal from their perspective, but I think the only point I want to pull out of that is that it kind of again highlights that problem area, without taking a word from yourself, Gavin, without pooping on Scales and Taylor too much, it kind of does show that there is an exploit that people are trying to at least focus their attacks down that side. And I think it's something that we should address long term anyway. I think we've all said that anyhow. That's all I want to see on that goal, because I don't want to be on a downer tonight at all. Brendan Rodgers comes out after the game, though, as we go into the second half, and he makes a point, and it's great to see him making this point and making an acknowledgement of what happened and when it kind of happened. But he acknowledges that when we get that penalty, which we'll talk about the penalty, is it a penalty or not in a second, but when we do get that penalty, even he feels that miss kind of changes the psychology of the team a little bit. It almost makes the team take the foot off the gas or something. Something just happened at that point, and he realizes that we weren't as attacking, we weren't as aggressive on the ball as we should have been. And he's acknowledged at that point that he probably should have done something better to have kept the pressure up and go for that third goal, because you should always, especially nowadays when we know how these decisions go against us with VAR at times, there's always that dubious penalty can crop up or whatever, that we really do need that third goal. You need a 2-goal cushion minimum in most of these games nowadays. So it's good to see Rodgers comes up with that, acknowledges that point as such. But to talk about the point itself of the penalty, Anthony, what did you think about the penalty? It kind of seemed very soft at first. How did you see it in the ground? Because I'm guessing you guys didn't have the luxury of a replay to see exactly what happened at the time.
I must admit, obviously, Willie Collum points to the spot really quickly. So from that, and there wasn't really a huge, there wasn't a real big outcry from the Rangers players that I could see anyway. It was basically, you've clipped him and that's it. But as time was going on, the length of time that they took to award that, if they're not sure, they should be calling Willie Collum over to the monitor straight away. But it was a good couple of minutes, and then they called Willie Collum over as well. And that didn't take forever either. It's one of those ones. Probably the fact that Matt puts both his arms out, it probably looks, like he's trying to make a meal of it, so to speak. But I have to say, when you watch it back, it's clear that it gets clipped, and the way that his body is and the way that the forward momentum he has means that any kind of contact is going to be enough to go over. It is a penalty for me. I don't quite understand why VAR took so long to decide it. There's clear contact, and you know, if that move doesn't happen, then Matt, although he's not straight on, but you know, the way that the abilities that he has, he looked as if he was getting ready to kind of have one of those famous curler shots, probably into the bottom corner. So there's no argument for me with the penalty. There's no debate there. But because of the length of time it took, it was a strange sort of feeling. I thought it's taken this long, they're probably going to reverse the decision. But even then, when Wally Collum stuck by his correct call, even although it was Matt that was taking it, I have to say, just with the length of time, I wasn't overly confident that he was going to score it either. But you just hoped, and like some of the guys have said in the comments already, if that penalty goes in, then it could have been a really even more of a fun day than what it was. But as time was going on, not that Joe Hart really had anything much to do in the game, but you can start to, when it was sort of getting 80, 85 minutes and further on, and we just weren't, like Brendan Rodgers says, we weren't being as calm on the ball as what we had been previously in the match. You start to worry, you know, is Raskin going to hit one and it's going to deflect into the top corner? And you know, a draw would have felt like a defeat, given how dominant we were in the first half. But yeah, thankfully we held on, McGinty. But yeah, clear penalty for me. And my only wondering is why it took so long to come to that decision as well. But credit to Wally Collum with sticking with his original correct call.
Yeah, it's something we don't often say, that is credit to a referee. I think twice he's done the right thing. Okay, he didn't give a straight red card, but I think he's tried. I think Wally Collum in this game's actually tried to utilise VAR more than anything else. When you see that he clearly saw the Lundstrom tackle as a clear foul and hits it with a yellow card, but I think he knows very well that it's going to get looked at for a red. Whereas if he gives a straight red and it turned out that he did get the ball, then he'd have to reverse that back. And I think that looks worse reversing it back to a yellow than it is to reverse it to promote it up to a red. When it comes to the penalty, I think he's done the right thing to give the penalty, because if you don't give
McGinn, if you've muted.
Oh, you went on mute, mate. You've went on mute.
Lord knows how that happened. I didn't even touch anything. Doing all this. Yeah, so as the penalty is concerned, I don't know where I'm muted off there, but as the penalty is concerned, I think Willie Collum's done the right thing by calling it a penalty straight away. Because if he doesn't call it a penalty and VAR looks at that, I think VAR might look at it and go, it is a bit soft, not a clear and obvious error, don't give it. I think he's done the right thing to give it and then go clarify it himself. And as you say, he's done well to actually stick by his guns and correctly call it a penalty. As for the actual contact itself, it is soft to the naked eye as such, but as you describe it, when you're going through that motion and that pace and the way it happens, any touch is going to send you flying. Two things to kind of look at is what Matt O'Reilly's left foot is doing. Some people are saying, oh, he's put his foot out to make contact with Diamandi. It actually isn't that. He's taking the shot. He's literally teeing up for the shot. Hence, his foot looks like it's curling out. He's about to strike the ball. So the penalty at that point is definitely, for me, a penalty, no doubt about it. And you can tell by Diamandi's reactions, even before Matt O'Reilly hits the ground, his arms are going up to like, oh, I know I've made contact. I'm not doing anything else here. He's trying to pull himself out and say, I'm not doing anything else here. But he clearly knows he's made contact. And again, that's enough to say, this contact, the guy's down, it's a penalty all day long. Gavin, yourself watching that in the stand, especially the kind of wait, as Anthony says, for VAR took quite a few minutes. Were you apprehensive at that point? Did you feel that kind of gut instinct that, fuck, we're going to miss this? Or were you somewhat confident with Matt O'Reilly these days stepping up?
I guess a couple of points on there. Whenever I saw it, I think the way that Matt O'Reilly went down, I don't think that he could have manipulated that kind of that fall. I think it looked a natural fall. So I was thinking penalty. However, I did say to the guy next to me, it looked a tiny bit soft, but I don't think he could, I think it was a natural fall. That might sound really kind of it might not make sense what I've just said, and I'm sorry for that. I probably could articulate it a bit well. It looked a natural fall. However, it did, however, look a bit soft from real time in the stadium. The other thing is that it's Matt O'Reilly, and I think he's quite an honest player. I think if Matt O'Reilly goes down in the box, I also think he's quite an intelligent player too. So I felt it must be a penalty, and I was relieved that Colm made the decision to give the penalty. I think that referees sometimes, and by the way, this is another thing that I would like to talk about. I think it deserves a mention, the refereeing for the full game. I'll keep my powder dry for the rest of it in case we want to come back to it. But this particular thing, I think sometimes referees do know that they've got the insurance policy of VAR, which will cover them if they've made the wrong decision. So I'm glad that Colm followed his instincts and said it was a penalty. So that's one thing. I agree up until that point. Whenever VAR comes into play, I felt that was the wrong decision. Why are they trying to re-referee that particular point? You can see from the replays there is contact. So why is VAR getting involved in that? What's their motivation from that? I think that there was no what's the a clear and obvious error. Where was the error in that judgment from Willie Colm? So I think that was the wrong place for VAR to get involved in that. It sounded like they were trying to re-referee the game. So that was one fault. The next fault is the fact it took so long. I don't know how long it took. It fell in the ground 5 minutes, probably only took 2.5 minutes. That was unnecessary as well. And the delay that causes for the penalty kick taker, you know that's going to play into their mind. And I'm watching Matt O'Reilly and I'm thinking, this guy does, he meditates and stuff like that, like after games, before games. Like the guy is, calm as a Hindu cow most times. However, whenever you need to wait, a young man, 23 years of age or whatever he is, whenever he has to wait that long, and like you saw him start to do keepy ups, I think it's like one of those ones whenever you kind of you're trying to just like will your body to kind of like follow the commands of your brain at that point, because I think he was aware of that danger of the longer it would take, his body would betray him, and I was getting apprehensive at that point. So I wasn't surprised that he missed the penalty. It was somebody said it in the comments that he's done it already against Butland. Butland was ready for it. He could have went down the middle. He could have the last penalty he took. It was like right in the top corner. He went for the weakest option, and I think if VAR never got involved, then he could have dispatched that confidently, emphatically. I think that was one of the reasons, perhaps. Butland guessed the right way, so maybe a wee bit of credit to him as well. So that's that. But I think credit to Colm for making the right decision, but VAR should not have reared its head. So that's my thoughts on it.
No, you're definitely right. I think it's compliments to Colm overall for that game. Apart from the only thing I would say is his first kind of 15 minutes, he let a lot of niggling fouls away from them sort of thing. And I started to wonder when he was going to actually dish out the first yellow card, which I think actually came to us surprisingly, but unsurprisingly. But I think he made, with the big calls, I think he did get them right. I think he did lean, especially when it comes to the red card. I think he definitely leaned on knowing that VAR would correct it if it had to. But you're 100% right with why is it re-refereeing the game. I have no problem with VAR looking at something kind of like behind the scenes. So if you're going to call a penalty, I have no problem with calling the penalty if VAR looks at it while the on-field stuff is sorting itself out for the penalties to be taken. VAR can have a look and turn around and go, oh Christ, there's actually no contact there, and then say to the referee, and that's fine. But to take that length of time to try to find a point to make the ref look at it, to then re-referee the game, that's where, it's, as you say, Gavin, it's not clear and obvious that there's an error, because there was no error. It was a correct call. There was no need to overly get involved. I'm 100% for VAR looking at almost everything that happens, especially in the box, but there's no need for that to be that length of time and having the ref go to the screen. It was unnecessary. And tinfoil hat on at times, we all know we're sometimes not paranoid enough. Was that part of a play from VAR? As much as Willie Colm is, hated by them, and we believe he's just not really a good referee. He actually had a decent game on Saturday, but has that been VAR and the powers that be? Because we all know what allegiances they align to. Was that them trying to just make something happen where it didn't need to be? And then again, as you say, with Matt O'Reilly, is it taking him out of the zone enough that he's overthought his penalty? Instead of just drilling it down the middle or high into the corner, he's tried to place it to the right side to Butland's left, and Butland's guessed right. He's went for it. Somewhat credit to him, any keeper that saves the penalty, kind of half credit, half potluck, but it is what it is. But they're the negatives of the game. Overall, we go on to see at the game 2-1 in the second half. Not much else happens overall, I don't think, as a big flashpoint, as a big talking point, until you get to the last kind of 10, 15 minutes where that edginess starts to kick in again. For me personally, it did kick in, but it wasn't as fearful as it has been earlier in the season. For you guys, I'll go to Anthony first again. How were you feeling that kind of from 75, 77 minutes onwards, once Rangers started they had to go for it, obviously. Once they started to put a bit more pressure on us, did you have that churning in your stomach, like, we're going to throw this away again? Or were you quietly confident?
Joe, it's a strange one. Probably from about 75 to maybe sort of 87, 88 minutes, I was definitely like that, and it just felt like time was really kind of going by really slowly. But I have to say, once they announced that there was going to be 7 minutes of injury time, I don't know how long into injury time, because obviously it doesn't show you on the screens at Celtic Park. But when Adam Ida makes the big long run, he really, you could argue, possibly could have done better with the chance that he has. But it was quite a long run, and he shoots and it goes out for a goal kick. And I don't know why, but I knew that there was still going to be a wee bit of time to play. But I knew that run had still into the time a little bit. And after that, I have to say I was genuinely okay. I think knowing that we weren't going to lose the game, I think when it kind of became that point, I says, right, well, no matter what happens now, absolute worst case scenario, we're still going to be 3 points ahead, which is absolutely brilliant. It would still have been in our own hands for the rest of the week. So I kind of calmed myself down after that, to be honest, McGinty. But to be fair, Rangers didn't really threaten in the game. Obviously, they got their goal, but I don't really recall too much happening in the second half that, we were really worried. There was a couple of half chances here and there, but Joe Hart, for all that it was a must-win game for both sides, I don't really think that he had really much to do. So yeah, I think definitely that kind of the latter part of the second half, definitely I had that nervousness, but as stoppage time wore on, I was more and more confident that we would see it out, and we duly did.
And did we, Gavin, yourself, pretty much the same question, being in the stands watching the game. I'll expand it to the whole game though. Did you feel that Rangers really created any threat to us throughout the game? Did you all during the game feel, also we're talking about 2 quick goals in the first half, could have been 5, 6, 7 and a DVD made out of it, but throughout the game, did you feel kind of lacking confidence in us holding out? Did you feel like Rangers were going to pose any great threat to us throughout the game?
Going into the second half, where we started to see that Rangers were confident and they were pushing it, which that tends to happen whenever Rangers are losing. That's when they start to show a little bit of fight, and that's where they go wrong. That's why we're champions and they're not champions. So there was a part in the game, when Rangers were starting to show a little bit of fight, and they made some substitutions, which I thought actually did work to their benefit, such as Raskin coming on for I don't know whoever, and the left back one, Yilmaz, who came on for Barisic. I thought that worked to their favour. I think Raskin's a far better centre back than centre mid than Lundstrom is, and Yilmaz is get energy and pace compared to Barisic, who seems to be on his last legs. So I thought at that point, I was opened, or I was entertaining the possibility that Rangers might get lucky here and they might actually get a goal. However, we were there wasn't fear, but there was an acceptance on my part that things might not go the way that I want it to go. Rangers only had one attempt on target, and that was a goal. I think that totally reflects how toothless they are up front. Dessers was running out of gas by the end of it, and they had to change him for Roof, and he never really had much support up front. I thought the tactics of Rangers overall in the game, especially the opening 20-odd minutes, this is a must-win game for them, and they never went for the jugular. Their best hope was to contain us for the first 20-odd minutes and remain in the game, not concede, and maybe frustrate the fans. I thought that was their tactics, albeit they've got injury crisis, which doesn't help them. But it shows that we are the better team. We had the better tactics, we had the better personnel. And let's not forget, obviously, we had a lot of people who were fit and firing on all cylinders. But let's go back to the first game at Ibrox, when they were the clear favourites, and we had Lagerbielke and Scales at centre-back at Ibrox in the opening game, and we were the ones who came away with the 3 points. It goes to show that even whenever the chips are down on our side, we still rise to the fore, and Rangers don't display that behaviour. They don't have the mentality, they don't have the personnel for it, they don't know what it takes to win these games. In terms of the game itself, I felt that we had some really big performers, and I want to make an obvious point in speaking about this. Cameron Carter-Vickers, head and shoulders above everybody in defence. Callum McGregor and O'Reilly in the midfield were brilliant, and up front, Maeda and Forrest were fantastic. I spoke about in the last podcast, last Wednesday, I think it was, who would start over Kuhn and Forrest. I was worried about the jeopardy, the risk of Forrest getting overrun with physicality, having to defend. Didn't work out like that. Forrest showed so much maturity in possession. It was unreal. And it's whenever you think about football and whenever you think you know what you're talking about, it's a further lesson. And I'll even hold my hands up. I kind of written off Forrest to an extent earlier on in the Celtic career whenever he signed that 4-year contract extension. But Forrest has shown at the weekend there, sometimes it's worth sticking with the tried and tested, the people with experience. Forrest, of all the wingers right now. Maeda, amazing. Brilliant. There were a couple of people who I thought got bettered over the 90 minutes. Alistair Johnson, I thought that he struggled against Silva. I know that Silva is a bit of a comical character in terms of his diving, but Silva makes intelligent runs. He's got a bit of pace, he's got a bit of trickery, and I don't know if there was anything playing into Alistair Johnson's mind about the penalty that he gave away at Ibrox in the last encounter. But I thought Silva definitely got the better of Alistair Johnson in the game. For the goal that we conceded, though, Alistair Johnson was outnumbered. They had Silva to contend with, and then they had the full-back Barisic who doubled up. AJ never had anybody to defend him in that situation, so I absolve him of any sins for that goal. I thought Hatate, I wanted to say this. If Hatate performed to the level that he's capable of, then this 2-1 victory could have been a 4-1 victory or a 5-0 victory. If Hatate's like the cherry on top, if he performs when everybody else is performing, then he's the difference maker. He's the intelligent guy. He takes the ball better than anybody in half turn. However, his passing during the game was off. It was off. Now, I know that some people might say, why are you being critical whenever we were practically champions? I'm just being balanced. I'm not being critical. Praise when praise is due, criticism when criticism is due. I'm just trying to get balance. I thought Hatate could have been a difference maker in terms of really enhancing the score. Scales manned up when he needed to man up, but in possession, he did what we all know that he is. But we wouldn't be where we are right now without Scales. So I'm going to kind of stop there. I'm not going to build up a steam right now. But I thought CCV, Calmac, O'Reilly, Maeda and Forrest, amazing, brilliant. We never had any passengers in the game. but there were some people who were better than others. So, I'll stop there.
No, that's actually quite fair, Gavin, and I'm going to throw this back to Anthony and try to get your take on a similar way as what Gavin's just done there. Obviously, we want this to be as positive as we can. We've all but mathematically won the league with 2 games to go. We just need a solid, a single 1 point, or them just to drop points even, and we win the league. It's pretty much as a done deal. So at a time like this, we do want to be generally positive, but at the same time, my personal opinion is I don't want us to just go with the flow and go with the tide. If there's people to be criticised, there's people to be criticised. We shouldn't criticise just for the sake of it, and we shouldn't beat people down just because they've been a whipping boy or whatever it is early in the season. People need praise when they do. So again, like Gavin says, from my point of view, Forrest and Maeda especially, they were fantastic at the weekend. Albeit, and this is going to sound really kind of weird and hypocritical, Maeda's kind of pass into the middle of the box that led to the Lundstrom own goal is actually a really shit pass into the middle of the box because it's going to nobody, which makes it even more comical that Lundstrom puts it in the back of his own net. But the ball that he received was fantastic. The way he brings that down in control was absolutely superb. It's something that you don't see too often from Maeda, is that kind of quality touch and technical ability. His celebration was just out of this world. You can just imagine the euphoria and the joy coming out of him when he jumps onto the advertising board and into the crowd. I mean, God bless the lad. He absolutely enjoyed that and he deserved it. Various other players, as Gavin says, credit where it's due. Nobody was really a passenger at all. Everybody kind of stood up when they had to. Especially Scales. He is who he is. He deserves his contract. But as I said earlier, I think teams are specifically picking out our left side of defence because it is a weak point. It's not to slate the guys. It is the weaker side of our defence. The one thing that will be, from me, a criticism is such, and it's something that I don't want to labour on too much today, is there's 2 moments that Adam Ida kind of show to me again why I personally wouldn't sign him for the 5 million. I would sign him for less money, but not for 5 million. Was the shot that you described earlier, Anthony, but then also there's a cross that was coming in and he was between 2 centre-backs and he could see that he wasn't likely to get the ball, so he just didn't do anything. And when the ball comes in, he's kind of like at a loss. It's like, why are you not even attacking the space on the hope that the ball comes in? He kind of just gave up. And it was just a weird thing that made me think, you're not reading the game properly. You're not reading the ball properly. You're not quite instinctive as I want you to be. It's a personal opinion on him. I wouldn't pay 5 million. I would pay 2 or 3 million, but not 5. But without labouring on my point too much, Anthony, as Gavin did as well, to some degree, is there anything that you would like to bring up about the game that really excited you that's maybe not been touched on, or any points that you want to say, we could be better here, could be better there?
No, really. I think, to be fair, Gav kind of covered all the main points, to be honest with you, just with individual performances as well. And I do agree it was probably, and it was strange as well because the first couple of minutes, he won a tussle against Silva, and it looked as though, and it was down the area where I sit, and you sort of had a bit of a chuckle at Silva, and you just thought, oh, this is going to be like some of the games at Hampden last year, for example, where he had the Rangers attacker in his back pocket. He thought AJ looks really up for this, but he did struggle. It's probably one of his poorest games that I've seen from this year. I know he's perhaps maybe not quite the heights this year as what he did last year, but I did think that it wasn't his finest hour. But by the same token, he never had either. And I think Liam Scales did grow into the game. There was a couple of times, don't get me wrong, I understood it was frustrating a couple of times when he made a pass, or if he would sort of gallop forward with the ball for a little bit and then he sort of stopped and looked. But as much as that can be frustrating, by the same token, I think what was frustrating me was a lot of the players that you would normally look to for that pass, the movement wasn't quite in sync, which meant that Scales had to hold on to the ball a bit longer than he maybe needed to, which to the detractors looks as though it's Scales' fault rather than some of his teammates. So there was a couple of times I thought that perhaps the movement wasn't quite there in the second half, and maybe alludes to what Brendan was saying, that maybe the penalty miss kind of changed the psychology of the game a little bit. But definitely as time went on, especially in the second half, there was a couple of times where Raskin would attempt like a little through pass, and there was once or twice when Scales would put a foot out and block it for going through. So for all perhaps not the best with the ball at his feet, he certainly didn't hide either, and made some crucial interventions. So it was definitely one of those, but it's probably kind of representative is this season. We have still got an impressive points tally at the moment, but it's not been a vintage year in terms of swashbuckling performances. But when it matters, the team have still had enough to do what needed to be done to get the job done. And we now sit here, like you say, we're getting to just a couple of games to go. As long as we avoid defeat on Wednesday night, that's all wrapped up, and that's all you can ask for, I suppose, as a supporter.
Exactly, that's all you can ask for. Completely in our hands. We just need to get our results somewhere in the last two games. I know people have their feel over the Kilmarnock game, but I think even with that, and knowing St Mirren's at home in the last game, it's a given. I mean, if we lose the league, which still possibly could happen, it would be absolutely, a miracle for them. Unheard of disaster from us. It's just not going to happen. But to wrap up the game aspect of it and move into the post-match kind of analysis and reactions that have happened, I'm kind of going to merge in fact, I won't. I'll leave them separate. Brendan Rodgers, he's done two interviews. One is basically covering the game. As I touched on earlier, he makes a good point about from the penalty onwards, we kind of weren't quite as aggressive in the attack and didn't dominate as much as we wanted to. But the point I want to bring up most and talk about mostly, without having a whole episode of Rodgers' mentalities and interviews throughout the season, but I think you can see what's happened over the season, and maybe we'll talk about it more in depth in another episode. But the key one is what he said in the interview the other day, that he's been beaten down a few times this season. He's been, called out that he's going through the motion. He made the point of, if he's going through the motion by basically being in work 11 or 12 hours a day, going home, having his dinner and watching more football, then what the hell is other managers doing? Because if that's going through the motions, that's dedication to most people to your job, doing that level of input. His results have eventually came to fruition, as we all know on this podcast and across the Celtic world. Our injury crisis has been abysmal this year, but as the players have slowly got back over the last 2-3 months, we've seen the performances get better and better. Not always for 90 minutes, but it's getting better and better. You can see from his early interviews, let's ignore his summer interviews because he's on a high coming back. He's trying to impress. He's trying to say the right things at the right places. But as the season went on, his tone and his choice of words and what he's saying changed throughout the season, especially before the January window and at the end of the January window. There were night and day contrasts of what he was saying he wanted in a transfer window and what he got, and then what he said afterwards. Totally different from one month to the next. But do you think, Gavin, I'll go to you first on this one. Do you think he was right to come out and say that he has been, he's been beaten up throughout the season by the media? He's been called, going through the motions, that he's not 100% at the club. Do you feel like Rodgers has done the right thing by now coming out and, I say criticise the media, but he's making a point to say, look, I'm here, I'm doing my job, and I'm bringing the results. Do you think he's right to come out now and say it, or do you think he should have waited to the end of the season, come out earlier, or not said anything at all?
I think he's got every right to say what he did, whether you agree with what he says or not. And I guess there's another discussion point about who do you think he's targeting with those comments about people writing him off. So yeah, he has earned the right. We are within touching distance. We've got 9 fingers on the trophy right now, not just one hand, 9 fingers. Which is probably the amount of fingers that Hun has got. But so yeah, he's earned the right. I'm not. I don't follow the Scottish media that often. I don't think it's good for my mental health to get bogged down in what the Scottish media talk about. I know that TalkSport, I do actually listen to TalkSport. Obviously, that's not really Scottish media. I do listen to them. But I'm sure that there's been a lot of people in the media who have written off Brendan Rodgers, who doubted his motivations for coming back. I think that was a fair question. People unsure of his motivations to come back to Celtic. Why would you go over old ground whenever you'd kind of been there, done it, and got the t-shirt sort of thing? But we weren't really privy to Brendan's thoughts about why he did that. You know, he didn't have to spell it out in black and white, you know, and to make a compelling case as to why he has came back to Celtic. The fact that he came back to us whenever we needed somebody experienced to kind of take the reign, whenever Ange Postecoglou, who it was almost his legend was growing and growing at Parkhead, you know, and the void that he left. A lot of people were grateful that Brendan Rodgers took over. I guess another valid point would be to say is, was there any point in the season where criticism was merited for Brendan Rodgers? Now, I did actually say in the group chat, fess up, has anybody written off Brendan Rodgers during the season? Now, what I can remember myself saying was I never wrote him off. However, I was concerned at one point whenever we were going through a really bad patch, and I wasn't seeing the fire from him in interviews. We were picking up somewhat poor performances and results, and I was perturbed by Brendan Rodgers' comments in the post-match interviews, and I was wondering, we need a solution, and he's not. He didn't seem angry in these interviews, and I needed reassurance as a football fan that we were going to get back on track and that he meant what he was saying. And I just felt, and during some of the interviews, that he seemed a wee bit passive, and I was worried about that. I even went to say, I actually used the word neutered. It looks like he had been neutered whenever he came back. That's as bad as I was in my criticism of Brendan. However, whenever it came to do we sack him, I was like, well, we're at this point right now. It's the point of no return. So I thought, don't sack him. Don't bring in someone new to steady the ship to prepare for next season. I just felt, stick with what we've got, and what will happen. Things can't get any worse. So that was the depth of my criticism for Brendan during the season. So I think that there was, to an extent, merit to question him, but not to question his credentials. There was a lot of factors that conspired against Brendan: injuries and really, really poor recruitment. And another kind of interesting question was, Brendan was kind of taking responsibility for the signings. And people were saying, well, if you're taking responsibility for the signings, then it's your problem that we're stuck in this mess. But again, I guess with a wider resolution perspective, you're saying, well, if he's going to throw the board under the bus right now for the recruitment, then there's already infighting within the club. So I felt that the only response that Brendan could make was to take ownership of the recruitment, to say it's my job and the club's job to recruit these players. I signed off on it. That was the only response that he really could make as a professional manager. And I say the word professional here because you don't want it to get a reputation. You do it once and that will stick with you for the rest of your days. You do it once to slag off your employers, your board, the people who hired you, and then future employers will think, well, that tag is going to stick. I don't want a guy who's going to criticise me. Why should I employ him? So I totally back Brendan for sticking with the club line, like it's our signings. So yeah, the season has happened. We are where we are now. Things got better. Rangers, to an extent, did capitulate. However, let's not forget that we have not been beaten by Rangers in any of these games so far, and that's all down to Brendan Rodgers navigating us through these choppy waters. So we are where we are right now, and Brendan Rodgers has earned the right to call out the detractors. And whether you want to say that it's some Celtic fans, and whether you want to say it's people in the media, he's earned the right to do that. Aye.
I mind you asked that question, was it 2 days ago? Was it Saturday? Was it Sunday? In the group chat about hands up who who'd written him off at any point during the season. And I replied, I'll say it on here as well, because I think I've said it enough times anyway. That Motherwell game, by half-time, I was very, very close. That was, if we didn't get the result on that day, if we didn't bring that back, that was my point. I could feel it in me changing throughout that game. That was my point of the last straw at that point, because he's going on a really bad performance run. Not just results. Results were largely okay, but the performances were really, really shocking. To have Brendan Rodgers lead our club is just, you've moved it on anymore. Sorry, Monty. It's all good. But he changed it, and then you take a step back, and as you see, Gavin, a lot of things went against him, especially injuries and recruitment, the two that you've mentioned, but especially injuries. And you saw the players starting to come back, and you realise, hold on a minute, we've not had the players to give Rodgers the best chance. I mean, it's all right seeing inherited a treble win the season, but as I've posted in the group chat numerous times, at least 6 of the starting 11 are not here in various capacities throughout the season, be it injured, be it sold, be it injured then sold in the baddest case. Let alone other players on the fringes who had put in 20, 30 appearances last season. They're not here. There's large parts of that treble win side is not here. He struggled with it a lot. Recruitment wise, though, was another big one. I think these are the two biggest things that's went against him. But you're 100% right, Gavin, in your analysis of it. When he first came in, he has to be professional. What's he going to do in those first few months, especially the summer window? What is he really going to do? Shit on the board and the people who just gave him the job again for whatever his motivational reasons are for coming back, whatever they are, personal to him, we'll probably never find out directly. But he's not going to turn against him straight away. He's going to, professionally want to keep his job cushy, safe. He doesn't want a hard time. But at the same time, he's, from an outside point of view, it looks like he's been told one thing about the recruitment being different and better, and look at how we performed with Ange, getting players in early, look at the upturn and all the rest of it, and it does look good. But then, as I said, you look at his interviews throughout the season, especially going into the January window and then coming out the January window, how it changes what he's saying in his mood. I think it's clear that recruitment has obviously not been up to scratch. It's not been what he believed it was before he signed back in summer last year. And I think he's now, in whatever capacity he's doing, making those changes or forcing the board to make the changes, at least to make it different. Now, the proof will be in the pudding as we go into the new window coming up. Do we actually do anything different, or is it going to be more of the same again? We will find out. Another window, another lifeline to the board as far as I can see. But to keep it on topic, Anthony, and bring it back to yourself, with Rodgers' comments this weekend, especially about the ones about, he's been written off, he's been told that he's going through the motions. Do you think he's right to come out now? Should he have waited maybe one more game to make sure that the league's tied up, or should he came out fighting earlier? Or like Gavin, do you think he's probably right in being professional throughout? And now that we're at the stage we are, now's the time to hit.
Yeah, I was practically beating my chest when I heard these comments on Saturday, mate. I thought it was an absolutely terrific, a terrific piece of material that he gave. But no, I see what my should we wait till it's mathematically impossible? But I think obviously it's maximum coverage when it's a derby, so the message will get heard and heard wider. Probably, and that's probably why it's ended up being a topic on shows like Talk Sport today as well. Just been reading some of the comments coming in, but in particular to the things that Monty's been bringing up, absolutely on the ball for me. There's been a lot of things that have went against him this season, and yet, whilst many, and there was a lot of people sort of losing their heads with him, he's, for me, remained the calmest man in the entire club, to be perfectly honest. And there's no doubt about it that he's been frustrated with some of the poor recruitment, which no doubt did happen last season, last summer. In January, we did try and sign players. It didn't work out. That's not necessarily Celtic's fault. We didn't sell. I don't know if there'll be Atletico Madrid fans doing their podcast raging that little Celtic didn't just say yes the minute they inquired about Matt O'Reilly. If a club doesn't want to sell, there's not much you can do unless paying ridiculously over the odds for them in January. He brought in Adam Ida, who a player that he seems to have some sort of connection with from down south. He knew about him. He might not be the finished article, but he fits the kind of prototype template of what Brendan looks for in a striker. And he's we're by no means saying that this guy's Moussa Dembele, but he did deliver the points in 2 crucial away fixtures when things weren't great, and perhaps the mood in the stands wasn't totally harmonious. But people talk about the players that are primarily at the club at the minute were signed by, or that are certainly playing, were signed by Ange to play that style of football. Now that's not necessarily how Brendan Rodgers wants to play the game. However, what does frustrate me is, to listen to some supporters, I pushed back on this myth that every single week Ange ball was unbelievable and we were just, blown away week after week of, this incredible, powerful football we did. There was a lot of nervous times we played under Ange as well, and there was some performances, especially at home, that could have put you to sleep. So I just always push back on this narrative that Brendan Rodgers football's rubbish. Not that you guys are saying that, I'm just saying a more general comment that Brendan's football's rubbish, and that Ange's football was brilliant. And of course, Ange never accumulated more than 7 points against Rangers in the league season. Brendan's got 10 out of the 12 this year. So I think that, with, I would argue, not necessarily the quality player that he wants. And absolutely, I think now the departure of Mark Lawwell can only be a good thing, and hopefully Brendan's getting to bring in guys that he trusts to get the recruitment right. And there's no doubt, obviously, now with the Champions League money, and of course the surplus of cash we already have, I think there has to be serious investment, and he's got to be allowed to bring in his players. I think last year, he was sold a pup, like you guys said from the outside. It looked like things had changed, and because he wasn't almost universally welcome back, he had a fine line to sort of tread between not wanting to publicly criticise the board, because we know that's part of the reason why he left the first time round. But by the same token, most football managers, when they take over a club, they're coming to, like Ange, to rebuild something, but it's not often you're having to come over from having won a clean sweep. So there is that kind of, you're kind of between a rock and a hard place. But credit to him, and like you say, the injury crisis has been unprecedented at times, and you take the best centre half, or one of the best creative midfielders, or your striker being a little bit off form in the winter, that's going to have an effect on any team. Doesn't matter whether it's they play in the Scottish Premier League or the Premier League or La Liga or anything like that. But he's proven now that, I would argue, with one hand tied behind his back and a air of negativity, some of it from our own camp, but a lot of it, these belittling comments in the media, he's still delivered a league championship and all the riches that brings with it, the Champions League qualification as well. He's earned the right to say what he said. I back him on everything that he said about it, because I thought he was spot on. But in the summer, this is absolute last chance saloon for these suits in the boardroom. They've got to realise that they've got an asset in the dugout. He's one of the top draw. He represents the club so well. The way he speaks, the way he comes across, the way he handles himself, and all the flack that comes with the job. He's got to be backed by his employers big time in the summer, and he's got to be allowed to bring in the players he wants to take the club forward. We've got the Champions League in its new format to look forward to next season. If we want to do anything in that, then he's got to be allowed to bring in his players. And we as supporters as well have got to, support him as well, and not bring up events of 2019 every time we don't win a game. This is the time, as some of the guys are saying in the comments, build for a position of strength, which is something we've not done in the past. Really push on and leave all our rivals, both real and imagined, in the dust.
I am going to try my best to remember what you just said there about last chance to lose for the Suits, and hope I don't have to come back to it this time next year and ask you a question of how much more you're going to give credit to them. But it really is. It almost feels like some of us keep saying that every window and every summer that, okay, this time they're going to push the boat out. This time they're going to back the manager. This builds some strength, and it never seems to happen. But it's getting really close. Every time it gets closer and closer to the point for those guys upstairs to really realise that they're getting less and less chances here. This gap over his lordship, perhaps. But to move it somewhat on, there's so much I want to talk about there again, and could delve into another half hour talking about Rodgers and all.
No, we could go for another 2 hours, McGinty. Come on.
We could, but some of us have work in the morning. So I want to move it on just to keep on topic and on point a little bit to what we wanted to discuss tonight. And the next point is the general meltdown, shall we call it, of a certain pundit. Now, when Chris Boyd is going against what you're saying in favour of Celtic, surely Kenny Miller has to realise he's on the wrong side of history here. We'll not need to debate amongst ourselves, is it a red card or not a red card? That is a red card every day of the week. We all know it is. But is it not just one of the sweetest things, knowing that Kenny Miller, and I didn't even realise he was this staunch of a bear, but it turns out he is, even after playing for us for a period. But is it not one of the sweetest of sweet things to know that that is the internal psyche of some of them, that they really are having a meltdown? Because the way he came out on commentary, you guys would have missed, but on commentary and during the game, he was adamant that was not a red card at all. And then he comes in after the match, which I'm sure you've all seen since, and he doubles down. He doesn't back out of it. He doesn't accept that maybe he overreacted, nothing like that. He doubles down on it. And then I believe he's actually came out in a column in the paper and trebled down again on it. He is just not backing down on this. Guys, we don't need to delve too deeply on it because we all know what's going on. But your take on the meltdown of Kenny Miller and overall the sweetness of this title win, once it really does get handed over to us. Your takes on it, guys. Whoever wants to step up first.
You want to go, Gav? Or?
Look, it's delicious. I spoke about how great the weekend has been, and Kenny Miller has certainly added to that. Jesus. But his logic is entirely flawed from top to bottom. The fact whenever you've got Chris Boyd, who is putting as much distance as he can between him and Kenny Miller, it tells its own story. Like you said, I can't help you out in this one, and I can't stick up for you in this one. And Kenny Miller saying, I don't need anybody to stick up for me. I don't need that. And you've got Chris Sutton standing next to him, and Chris Sutton is just like every now and again pulling lit faces, like incredulous. I don't know if anybody's ever been in a situation where they've gotten so emotional and they're in an argument and it's a losing argument, and you've lost the plot, and it's your emotion which is leading the way, and you're just digging and digging and digging and digging, and at the end of it, you're just looking up to see where you started from and where you've continued into. It was tragic. It was car crash TV at its very, very best, which doesn't happen that often on Sky Sports for Scottish games. Normally there's banter and there's good-natured banter. But Kenny Miller has really taken it to new depths. I guess one of the questions will be, why is he employable? Is he employable only now going forward? Because like you're self-employed. For if you're a pundit, you're self-employed. You're not contracted for years and years. You're self-employed, and he might be asked back because of his emotional vulnerability. So if Celtic keep winning, which the cards say, the odds say that we will keep winning, we'll continue our dominance. Does that mean that Kenny Miller will be put more and more in front of the camera for more meltdowns? It was juicy. It was a cherry on top. Whenever you came back after the game and you watched it back to see that, and let James McFadden, he's like chatty, like you said, no, but he's in control. He's in control. And McFadden said, so you're saying that he meant it? It's like, what are you talking about? Did he mean it? The logic, it was so flawed and it was so comical. It just didn't make sense. It was brilliant. How does he employable? You know, like if he's to be taken as a serious pundit, so is he now going to be a joke figure in the future? Where does he go from here? That's the kind of best part. I don't know, Anthony, if you've got a different take from me. I don't know, man, but it was lovely.
I think it has to be taken as a joke figure because even if you think back to when Sky tried to do the whole two Chrissies with Chris Commons and Chris Boyd, they dragged the whole one Celtic, one Rangers. And the only way Boyd still has a job there is because of his absolute obvious bias and staunchness in one direction that is actually comical. Not even to us, to their side as well, it's comical. And I think Kenny Miller's going to go fully down that line of it, of employ me because I'll just shout nonsense and I'll get clickbait nonsense out of it. Whereas Chris Collins, he's nowhere to be seen anymore. And I don't know what his personal reasons are for that, but on the outside it looks more like you were just a shite pundit and you didn't have any character. Whereas Boyd and Miller, the building characters have been just thick as shit. Anthony, sorry, I'll let you jump back in. How do you see the whole thing? The meltdown, is it sweet? You got anything else you want to add to it?
For me, as Gav says, it's the faces that Chris Sutton's making next to him. It sums it up what every rational human being is looking at. But it was he sounded like one of those, space cadets off a Heart and Hand podcast or something like, just completely utter drivel that he was speaking. As I said that to you guys in the group chat, says, somebody's needing to stick him in a bag of rice. But it was just an absolute. He's an absolute Fruit Loop. Anyone that argues that that's not a red card isn't operating with other wires crossed correctly. It's just you can't. There's times when you just cannot reason it. It's like arguing with a flat earther. It's just, what's the point? You can't logically argue with someone that's so far down a rabbit hole that they can't see any rhyme nor sense nor reason. And like you say, McGinty, the fact that even Chris Boyd, for all his staunchness, for all his bias, for all his one-sidedness, was sitting, looking at the floor, trying to, and even tried to have a joke and say, I can't stick up for you. And as Gav says, he then turned into, the wee guy that's had too much, won too many on a night out on a Saturday, thinking he's Ricky Hatton or something, But listen, it's absolutely brilliant. And Graham Souness as well was tying himself in knots today on TalkSport, trying to say that, there's not much between the teams. And, and as it was pointed out, they've taken 1 point from a possible 12 against Celtic, and Celtic have taken 10. How's that not a gap? But then he was saying the league position doesn't add because there's only 6 points in it, and he was tying his own argument in knots every time he would get asked a different question. But yeah, it's Bear meltdowns are an absolute joy to behold. I can't get enough of them, mate. And fingers crossed he has many more in the future, because if we get our house in order and do our things properly, then there's every chance we can go on to keep dominating this league. Yeah, James, you're absolutely bought on. I mean, if all the village idiots in the world came together and made their own village, Chris Boyd would still be the village idiot in that village, and yet he was made to look like Einstein compared to Kenny Miller's outburst. It's just as my big brother suggested, just hook that up to my veins. It's so great to see, and long may it continue.
Long may it continue indeed. However, this podcast is not going to be long continuing itself tonight, because we're into an hour and 12 minutes at this point. Sorry, Gavin, it's not a Wednesday or Friday. We're not doing 2 hours plus. What we are going to do is move into the last point of the this evening's podcast. I'm going to briefly run through a couple of the points of the Player of the Year awards. Was not there. I obviously got the list to the left-hand side here. I'll read out a couple of them because there's a few. I don't want to touch on all of them. Kyle gets the goal of the season. Matt Riley gets the Young Player and the Player of the Year award. Scott Brown gets his Legendary Player of the Year award. And I believe there's a Henrik Larsson one in there as well. Yeah, Outstanding Contribution award goes to Henrik Larsson. After that, there's probably not much we want to discuss too in depth on the podcast. However, what I will do is pass it up to yourself, Anthony, as a man who was there last night. Give us a few minutes of yourself, a rundown. How was the night? How did the rest of the awards go? I know there's a couple of funny anecdotes coming from Larsson himself, coming from Lennon, something about a roundabout in the 2003 season, Lyles and beach chairs and all the rest of it. But yeah, I'll let you discuss it as much as you want, Anthony. Off you go.
Thanks. Well, first of all, I think we've got to give credit to the club. It's the hydro, and obviously I know we fill a stadium, 5 times the size of it every week, but for an award ceremony to get that kind of crowd was absolutely incredible, and it was really well put together. It was Des Clark and Shaban from Talk Sport, and the radio presenter, they were doing the compare and stuff, and it was really well put together. Famous faces presenting the awards, receiving the awards. Scott Brown was meant to be there, Parkhead boy, but
he's meant to be there, but just like Anthony, he just cuts out randomly, and Scott Brown didn't bother his ass much like Anthony did.
That's it. Yeah, there was something that they said at the end that there was some sort of late family reason why he couldn't attend, and Martin O'Neill was meant to be there as well, but was unwell, so he couldn't make the night either, although he'd been advertised. But in terms of the winners, I didn't realise it was first time a player's done a clean sweep of awards. Matt O'Reilly made history last night, so he won the Young Player of the Year, the Player of the Year, and the Players' Player of the Year. No player in the last 20 years has ever done all 3, so an amazing weekend for him. But yeah, and just obviously the highlight along with that was, of course, having Henrik back, and the reception he got was fantastic. Chris Sutton presented the award to him, and they had to sort of wait a couple of minutes before they could start speaking because the full arena was just singing his song, and just incredible event. And when we put these sort of things on and it comes across right, and obviously there was the Lisbon anniversary event a few years back as well, and that went. I wasn't there that night, but I've seen obviously the footage of it, and it went down really well. And it's just another bit of evidence, not that we need it, but to show we are without doubt the only footballing superpower in Glasgow. When we do these things right, there's the other club just look like Glasgow's version of Espanyol. So far in our shadow, it's not even funny. But a brilliant event, and as you can tell, all the singing that was going on, that my voice is starting to sort of go now. But brilliant night, and full credit to all the winners.
Rightly said. It's something that the missus asked if I wanted to go to it myself, and I said, no, I'm not that fussed for it, sort of thing. But the more you see, especially when it's put together like it has been this time, Anthony, not that it's not always like this, but it just looks like a great event that I probably should have taken the chance and went along for it. People, I think as Monty mentioned there as well in the chat, if Edward was to come back, he would be quite excited, shall we say. I'm looking at a picture of Edward and Sam Rass on stage. They're 2 players who, we've missed. I think we've missed kind of characters like that a bit more in the squad. Although I think Dyson Maeda is becoming that kind of character, like Sam Rass, especially to answer Franny's question earlier. Cult heroes, not legends. I'll take Edward back. I know it'll be a hard pill for some people to swallow with the COVID season and how it perceives that he didn't show up to the game too much. But I take a guy like Edward back. Gavin, awards overall though, anything you want to add before we wrap up about the award ceremony itself, but who won?
Not really. I always think it's quite a risky event to organise whenever you don't know what the complexion of the league will be the following day. But I guess Celtic have demonstrated over a number of years that they know what they're doing. So I'm glad that everybody had a great time. Obviously, Anthony and his family had a fantastic time. So I'm really happy for the people who did make the effort to go out. McGinty, you said that your missus asked, "Do you want to go out to it?" And you're like, "Nah, it's okay. Come on, have a look at yourself." But not only to everybody who went out, I'm so glad that they enjoyed it, and so many big names showed up. There was that image of Kyogo shaking Henrik's hand, which
Just
is
looking at that.
It's iconic in a way. Yeah, I'm happy for everybody. Like even Ronnie Dyler showed up and stuff like that. It's funny how Ronnie Dyler is becoming a bit of a cult hero now, isn't it? It's funny how
I reckon he left just on the cusp of being a cult hero. I think after he's left now, just the way he speaks about the club, and especially coming back for that event the weekend, I think he'll go down as a cult hero. Personally, I would take Ronnie Dyler back as a manager in the future. I'm not saying I want rid of Rodgers or anything like that. I'm not saying he comes in the summer, but I would take him back personally, knowing everything we know about how the background works of this club, or what we understand and think that we know. I would take Ronnie Dyler back under slightly different circumstances to what he had previously. I think he's a good manager.
I hear you. I don't have anything bad to say against Ronnie Dyler. The only thing that I would caveat with that is that to be the manager of Celtic and to win against strong opposition is that you need to have a really, really strong mentality. And I think the past two managers, the current one and the previous one, Postecoglou and Brendan Rodgers, they've really got that. They know what it takes to win. I'm not shining on Dyler with that. I think his technical football knowledge, I'm sure that's really, really high. But I think there's so many different things that you need to navigate as a Celtic manager, and one of them is operating in the Goldfish Bowl and exuding this air of confidence. And Postecoglou and Brendan Rodgers radiated that confidence. But for the awards, Young Player of the Year, Matt O'Reilly. What is he, 23 years old, or it's the age of what you are at the start of the season? Yeah, I think normally you would hope that we would have a crop of youngsters who would be like on the periphery and that you'd be able to pick from. So obviously Matt O'Reilly, and that shows the lack of proper youngsters. It is what it is. And he got the Player of the Year as well, which, I think on the whole, well, he was our main representative for the league, up against Tavernier, Butland, and Shankland. I agree with that he would be our Player of the Year. Goal of the season, Kyogo at Parkhead against the Huns. I think that was probably the pick of the bunch. Kyogo had a fantastic effort at Ibrox. Probably one of the few, probably the only striker in the country who could pull off something like that. Johnny on the spot, you have got 2 seconds to think about it. Some people would have shot it and taken a few more touches, and then the keeper would close you down, and then you've lost the chance. But Kyogo took that effort and scored against Butland at Ibrox. But the particular one at Parkhead, that was goal of the season, probably a harder task because he's confronted with 2 towering centre-backs. And the easy thing to do would be to play it out wide. But Kyogo shimmied and he curled it round through the 2 of them into the top corner. And Butland, Rangers Player of the Season, couldn't get close to it. It was aesthetically a very, very pleasing strike. Beautiful. Probably, like, for me, maybe in my top 10 goals against Rangers in my lifetime. Top 10, not top, but in the top 10. So beautiful. Can I just say before we forget it, who'd be a baller and ball bag of the week? I'll do one. Okay, my baller of the week. I know a lot of people say Matt O'Reilly for his man of the match. I'm going to go for Callum McGregor because of, before the Hearts game, people had kind of said his physicality, it's not going to be good enough. Hearts he had a great challenge at Hearts, and that was kind of like a vindication for Brendan Rodgers to show, yes, I've made the right call in putting Cal McGregor back into this game. But people were maybe people still had that lingering fear. How good would Cal McGregor be? But he was sharp. He was sharp, and he kept getting fouled, especially in the first half. And that showed that he was quickest to the ball. He was winning the 50-50s, and they were bringing him down. And you've even get that viral moment when he's like pulling up Lawrence. He says, "Are you the new hard man?" You know, he does step up. Whenever people start to doubt Cal McGregor, that's the moment where he steps up in the big games, and then he puts the doubters to sleep again for another half a season, and then they'll rear their head again. McGregor is the man for these occasions, and that's why, for me, he is my baller of the week.
And a good way then to tie this podcast off, I'll ask you quickly, Anthony, if you want to add a baller or ball bag of the week before we wrap it up.
Well, if Gav's doing he's done the baller of the week, so I'm very happy to pick up the ball bag one, and I think there's only one candidate, an outstanding candidate this week, and it's Kenny Miller. There's just up the road, pal. I think that's the best way to describe it. And long may the meltdown continue, boys.
Oh, it's going to continue for the rest of this weekend then some. It's a good feeling knowing that, as you said at the start of the podcast, these next 2 weeks or so, we're going to be smiling all the way, and hopefully it's a final victory in 2 weeks' time to take the cup final home and the trophy back home ourselves for double. Anyway, guys, we'll wrap it up here for tonight, just making it up to an hour and 25, about half the time that Gavin is used to, so you'll have an easy, quiet one this one. Gavin, have you enjoyed yourself?
The last time that I was asked this question on the podcast, I went absent without leave. I ended up saying how much I was enjoying being on the Endless Celts podcast. I was arguing with Stephen about, no, the Jungle Gyms have been on longer than this. It's not been half a year. And then I ended up calling somebody on the podcast who I think is a really, really spiffing gentleman. And he's got a lot of opinions. But good, valid opinions. So I totally went AWOL the last time. So no, I'm going to handle it with a wee bit more control this time and say it's been a fantastic weekend. It's been a fantastic weekend. And I guess probably the other baller of the week would be Brendan Rodgers. He came, he saw, he conquered, despite all the doubters, despite all the fucking factors going against him. We're lucky to have him as a manager, and I hope he continues on next season, and I hope the board back him for next season, because if we're unified, then nobody can defeat us. That sounds quite poignant for me. I'll leave it there. I know, mate. I'm just fucking rambling. I'm rambling most of the time.
I know. You're trying to make this an hour and a half.
Yeah.
He's doing his best, dude. Absolutely brilliant, mate. Top posting, and here's hoping all the best to thanks to all the viewers and that as well for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed it, and here's hoping for a good result on Wednesday night, and we can, wrap up and celebrate in style.
Hopefully so. And as far as Wednesday night is concerned, I know that on the podcast we've missed quite a few double pivots here and there as the months went by. We do try our best to get on. I believe there is intentions of a Wednesday podcast, but before we get to it, we're not entirely sure if it's going to be a post-match or what's going to go on, but we'll also update on social media, I'm sure, and people let everyone know what we're going to do Wednesday. But if all else fails, we will definitely be back here on Friday, of course, with the usual Friday show, which I'm sure whoever's on, Gavin, will enjoy a couple of hours of banter leading into the weekend's game. But until then, guys, hail, all the best.